What's going on? In this video, I want to cover exactly how to install an inline amplifier into a stock head unit to turn the underpowered stock system into a premium sounding system in your car. To do that, I dug up my WRX head unit and my inline amp that I had, since I replaced my stock head unit with an aftermarket head unit and I don't need these two parts anymore. I can easily show you on the table how to get this done. So of course, this video is going to appeal to those of you who want to keep your car stock, but you're going to need to add an inline amplifier and an amp and sub to complement the lows. You'd be surprised how good the sound system will sound after you do all these things. So I'm going to show you how to install the inline amplifier, and I'm going to show you how your setup should look like if you're adding an amp and sub, and if you're driving your amp with an active Lineout converter like the LC2i. I will also show you what harnesses you're going to need to make this installation super easy. Here's the back of my head unit. Obviously, you're going to need to access the rear of your head unit, so you're going to have to remove it from the dash. And all cars are different. You're gonna have to look up and do your research, but if you have this WRX, then I'm gonna link in the description all of the videos that you're gonna need to get this done, since I already covered this information in other videos. But right now, for the sake of this video, we have the head unit already pulled, and we're gonna use our imagination a little bit here. So out of all of the connectors in the back, you're only interested in these two right here, the 10 and 6, okay? And all of these Fujitsu 10 head units that a lot of manufacturers use, they use these standard 10 and 6 plugs. If your particular car does not have one of these head units, then you'll have to find out which connector houses your speaker signals and your 12 volt and grounds and all of that, and find out if they make harnesses for it. But for right now, we're gonna pretend like this is connected to the car right here. To add an inline amplifier, you're gonna have to put the amplifier in line. So to do that, we're gonna have to literally cut all of the speaker wires so you can install the amplifier in line. But there's a much easier way of doing it. There's really no reason not to get a harness to do this. Instead of actually splicing into factory wires, you can just get a harness to make the job super easy. They're called breakout harnesses, but you can do it even cheaper than that. A breakout harness, in essence, is just these two connected together like this. Okay, so when you order that harness, then you can just easily cut into the wires of the harness if they're not already cut, and then you'll never end up actually cutting any factory wires. So that's why breakout harnesses are great. Now, if you want to save some money, you just get yourself two of these and make a breakout harness yourself. Here's a simulated installation on the bench. I'm using the harnesses, so we're not splicing into any factory wires except one, and I'll go over that in a second. We have a head unit right now providing an under amplified signal to the speakers, and those are these 8 speaker wires right here. So now, instead of going out to the harness, out to the speakers, these 8 wires are going into our amplifier, our inline amplifier. So now we have our 2 front and our 2 rears, and they're all color coded. So all you're doing is matching colors. You know, white, black to white, black, and then white to white, and so on and so forth. So that signal is going into the amplifier is amplifying it, and then it's coming out this way, and it's sending that amplified signal out to the speakers via this harness right here. This harness, of course, connects to the harness that goes to the speakers that we unplugged from here originally. So let's go over the other wires here that you can see. So all of these other wires right here, we have to send straight through back to the factory harness, right? All of these wires. So all we're doing is splicing them right back into where they belong, color to color, color to color. In the case of the blue and the blue-white, you can put both of those together onto the blue on this side of the harness, and that's also going to drive the remote turn-on signal for the inline amplifier. That's this blue-white wire that you see right here that I just extended so you can see it reach. This remote turn-on signal will send a 12-volt signal to this amplifier right here, telling it that it can turn on. If you don't have this plugged in properly, say you have it plugged into a source that is always hot, in other words, it always has 12 volts going to it, then the amplifier is going to stay on all the time and it's going to drain your battery. So we plug in that lead to a source that is only on when the ignition switch is on accessory or the car is on. In this case, we tapped into the power source for the antenna. It goes right there. And again, we're just going color to color. So blue, white, right into blue, white, right into blue, right? Couldn't be easier. This orange and black wire, unfortunately, the harness that I got, this one right here, did not include that wire. If it comes with an orange black wire, then obviously all you're doing is the same as this. You're just going color to color. So from there to there. In my case, it didn't, and I have to feed this head unit that signal so that the dimmer works properly. So what you have to do in this case is you are going to end up having to splice just this one wire if you don't get it, you know, on the harness. And all you're doing is basically taking the wire that comes here from the factory harness and that extra wire that is not represented on this side, you're just going to tap into it so that this gets the proper signal. Now we can talk about the inputs to the inline amplifier itself. Obviously, we're gonna have our 12-volt source and we're gonna have our ground source. These are necessary, right? You have to connect these because if you don't, obviously the unit is not gonna turn on. And there's also this blue white wire, and this is just a pass-through wire. So all this is doing is taking this signal right here and passing it through over here. So if you have multiple amplifiers, then you connect that to the amplifier's remote turn on signal and you don't have to run a separate wire. So this is just making more complex installations easier. Let's talk about the ground real quick. The ground ideally needs to go to the same point that all of your other devices are going to. If you don't have anything else, and this is the only amplifier that you have in your system, then you have to take this and put it to the chassis, a clean bare metal chassis point in your car. If you have multiple components, say you already have an amplifier, then this needs to go ideally to the same point as your other amplifiers, and that's so that you avoid ground loops. Now, your 12-volt source right here, this cable is a little bit more complicated, even though it shouldn't be. The reason is because this actually requires a 15 amp fused input to it. Unfortunately, for you WRX owners, this radio is a 10 amp radio. So if you want to do a safe and proper installation, you shouldn't plug this amplifier directly into this head unit right here. You shouldn't do it because it's different amperage. So there's basically two things that we can do about that. One, we can see if we can find a 12-volt source that is on a 15 amp fuse in the car, and you can check that by going into your owner's manual and looking at the fuses and see which ones are 15 and see if any of those run close to where this is going to be. If you can't find that or don't want to do that, another option of course is to actually install an amp kit from the battery. So you would run an amp kit through the firewall of the car somewhere into wherever your amp is going to be. Now, I would suggest going this route if you're installing an amplifier in a sub, which I highly suggest you do, especially if you have a WRX. You're gonna need those lows anyways. This is not what this amplifier is for. This amplifier is just amplifying your 4 door speakers. You're still gonna be lacking in the sub frequency department, and only a subwoofer can provide that. To do that, you'll have to install a separate amplifier and sub, and I'm gonna cover what that will look like here in a second. But in order to do that anyways, you're gonna need to install an amp kit like this. So in the case that you already have this, say you already have an amplifier in the trunk of your car or an amplifier under the passenger seat, like in my case I had it under the passenger seat. If you already have this cable ran to there, then you can just simply tap into the same spot, just like that, wherever your current amplifier is, just like that. Obviously, the inline amplifier is made so that it can fit neatly behind the head unit. That's not going to be possible in all cars. Sometimes you have to place it behind the glove box or in another location, depending on how much room you have in your particular car. But be aware that you might end up having to move this to place it somewhere far away from the head unit. If you have to go anywhere much further than behind the head unit or your glove box, then you're gonna have to extend these wires. So you might have to actually use speaker wire, like this is speaker wire right here, and extend all of those so that this can reach wherever you're gonna install it at. I'm gonna show you exactly what this is gonna look like if you have an LC2i, which is an active line-out converter, or any other active line-out converter for that matter, and you also have another amplifier to drive a subwoofer. Alright, so here's a depiction of the power pack installed like we've been talking about. If you do this, your 4 door speakers are going to get a much better signal than they were with a head unit, and it's going to sound pretty good. But what you're not going to get is that fill bass that you really need to round out the system. So to do that, we're going to have to add a subwoofer, right? So obviously this is not going to be to scale, so just keep that in mind. The subwoofer needs to be driven by an amplifier. And since this is for the 4 door speakers, we're going to add another amplifier right here. So now essentially what we have is a 5-channel amp. So you could do all of this if you were doing it all at once. You could do it with one 5-channel amp. But since we're doing it incrementally here, we're going to add a 1-channel amplifier to drive this subwoofer right here. And once we do that, we have to add an amp kit. And the amp kit is going to have a 12-volt line coming all the way from the battery. That line comes in from the battery to feed the amplifier. And now we have all of the power that we're going to need to power all of our components here. Of course, our ground right here is going to have to go to the chassis of the car, very, very close to the amplifier. So the ground wire can never be very long. So that's what we're going to do right there. And all of our other components are going to ground out in that exact same spot. The remote turn on connection right here, that's going to give the amplifier that 12-volt signal to turn on. Remember that wire that I told you about right here, that blue and white wire? That's where it goes right there. That's the pass-through wire that we discussed that goes from here and it passes through the amplifier. It comes out this way. That's where it goes. So bam, we're going to put that wire and connect it right there to the remote turn on. And then for the ground, like I said, it's going to go to the same point right there. And the 12 volts is going to tap into the battery 12 volt right up here at the amp, just like that. So now the only thing that we have left now is to feed this amplifier the speaker signals, right? We could feed it the high level input by just tapping into these speaker cables right here, but that's going to give us the signal from the head unit that may have rolled off bass or maybe attenuated, and we want better control anyways. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an active Lineout converter for this. That's going to be the LC2i right here. And lucky for us, the LC2i is a very easy installation at this point because everything that we need to install it is right here. For the speakers, we're going to tap into the front left and front right. That's going to be this white and gray wires right here. So all we're doing is, adding speaker wire here and tapping right into those wires. Your ground, as you can probably guess at this point, is going to go right to the same point up here. And again, this is not to scale, so the ground is definitely going to be shorter than what it seems like it would be based on this diagram. And the 12 volts is going to go right up here where the battery 12 volt comes in, just like that. Just like our other two components, the LC2i also needs remote in input. That's the 12 volts. It's going to tell it to turn on so that it doesn't drain our battery. I'm going to go ahead and connect the remote in line to this same remote spot up here. So that's going to look like that. At this point, we can use RCA cables to connect the bass output right here to the input of the amplifier. And then we can use speaker wires to go from the amplifier to the subwoofer. Those are all of the connections that we're going to need to make this work. Obviously, this is just the connections. We still need to configure the system and set the gains and volumes and such. But that's beyond the scope of this video. I will link to the video in which I go over all of that in the description. Out of all of my videos, the LC2i and Power Pack videos generate the most questions when it comes to the wiring. So I hope this video makes this very clear to those of you taking on this project. Let me know what you think in the comments section and be sure to give the video a like if it was useful to you. Of course, consider subscribing for more content just like this. Thanks a lot for watching and take care.